Hey, welcome back to J-Max Customs and Fabrication. This time I am going to finish this front frame rail section. In doing so, we have to build the plates for the saddles for the pins on the bottom of the radiator. And then I went and got an Apex 12,000 Badlands winch. We're gonna test fit that in here. It's gonna be close, I'm not sure, but that's gonna be up here behind the grill. Hopefully it can fit down in here enough that this roller fair lead here works. That was the initial plan. Okay, the first thing that we have to do over here before I can build the saddles for the radiator or anything is I need to know that my winch will fit down in here, because if I mount my radiator and the winch won't fit in there, then my radiator's in the wrong spot. So let's get this new winch from Harbor Freight opened up. Hey, they send you some swag, don't they? Think this will fit? It's almost like I downloaded the dimensions off the internet for that. Even with the synthetic rope version, this thing is pretty hefty. I have the engine hoist ready just in case I need to suspend this there for a minute, because I can't really hold this and take any measurements or anything. Well, that's good news. There's plenty of room for it. Let me go ahead and suspend this, and then I can give you guys a shot of it. Okay, come around here and have a look-see. As you can see, the only thing that's kind of tight is this ground wire, but that'll be kicked over here anyway. But there's plenty of room between there, and we're not tight against here. So I have the dimensions of the holes, and I'll get a measurement as far as where that plate needs to be. The top of our winch plate needs to be 7.5 inches from the bottom, but our radiator and everything is going to work right where it's at. So that's great news that my guesstimations worked out. So I can now go and design and cut out my plate for the winch, and I can cut out my saddle plates for the radiator, and we'll get all of that put in here, and then I'll final weld this whole piece up, and we'll take care of the frame on the driver's side, get that to where this will all slide in there where it's supposed to be, and then this can be welded on to where I don't need all of this to hold it up, and then we'll move on to plumbing up our radiator and our intercooler. We'll get that all plumbed in, and maybe we'll be able to put antifreeze in this episode, which will be a huge step forward. On to the going over to the plasma cam and getting everything worked up into the software and laid out and cut out, and then we'll bring it back and weld everything in. Once we get the winch fit up in here and make sure that that all fits, then I'm going to start plumbing up the radiator. You can see this Dodge top radiator hose, all I have to do is cut about a foot off of it and it'll just hook right up. That's going to be the easy one. Then the intercooler piping from the turbo up here, this is the piece that fit on the Dodge, and I just so happen to have two of them. And if we have this piece here and that piece there, we can cut the two of them off, weld them together, and we'll have a double offset tube that'll fit perfectly. The bottom radiator hose has to go from here to down there, and that's going to be the tricky one. I've got the Ford lower radiator hose. I think that's got to be cut, spliced, and turned about 90 degrees. And then I have the Dodge hose as well somewhere. And with the two of them, I think that it's going to take two splices, but it'll just be a matter of clearing the fan and everything and leaving room for a future fan shroud that I'll have to build. This top intake plenum here that's taped off, you can see how much dirt would have got down in the engine had we not taped that off. But the factory one, this was like the single largest kind of complication of moving the engine back that far, is that the intake plenum wants to be right where the brake master is. So I'm kind of at a little bit of a quandary here, because if this is mounted here like this, then do we cut this and turn it and then TIG weld the aluminum back together where that is, where it will clear? The only problem with that is that this needs to come like that. So this piece becomes almost impossible to go there. I have a few air-to-air tubes from 6.0 Power Strokes and 7.3 Power Strokes that I think I could build my own plenum right off of the intake, bring it up and over, and just build that to where it's spot on instead of trying to cobble that aluminum piece together. So I think that's probably what I'll do. Once we get the saddles for this lower radiator built and designed and get the winch plate designed, then this will get final welded. I've decided on this passenger side where the frame has this big kick out, I'm going to take the plasma cutter and I'm either going to cut a little bit of a groove or an opening in the frame that this plate will slide into, or I'm going to cut the frame off completely and just weld this to the frame. Either way, it'll work just fine. It'll be stronger than cutting the majority of the overlap off and just butt welding it. So we'll make that work. Maybe even I'll cut the frame off and weld a piece on there to where it's flat, and then weld this to the flat piece. It's getting exciting. The episodes are going to get more kind of based around this thing actually looking like a wrecker, which is going to be huge. I'm ecstatic for it, and I'm sure that you guys have been waiting a heck of a long time for it. So that being said, back to work on it. Okay, I got all of these numbers translated over here on the screen, and you can see this is my winch plate that goes into the front skid plate bumper area, and I have these cutouts in it to kind of lighten it up. And the reason that they look like that, these ears here with the hole in them, those are the mounts for the radiator. I'll cut those first, and then these triangle pieces are actually the linear support from the bottom of the skid plate up to the bottom of the winch plate. I just put them into here the way I did, and they look like that and they're kind of off, this one here will go from the bottom up to the bottom of the winch plate, and then this one will be a 90-degree support that'll go from this bracket to the bottom of the winch plate, just to lock in that third dimension to keep everything from twisting. And I laid it out this way because it saves an immense amount of metal. That's why it's going to look just a little bit off, is because they're not off where they are going to go. So with that, I'll kick up the machine here. We're about to need another sheet of 1/4-inch plate. About got this one burned up, which I guess it is what it is. With that said, let's fire this thing up. Okay, everything is all cut out. So let's head back over to the other shop and see if any of it fits. Back over here in the big shop, I kind of left you behind a little bit here, but look at that. That's all bolted to the plate. The plate's sitting in here. Everything, this ground wire is the only thing that is gonna have to keep from rubbing on this intercooler so we don't rub a hole in either one of them. So now that we have that done and got this in place, and we know that our radiators are gonna clear, I also have the tabs underneath with the rubber saddles on them to hold the radiator. So those fit, and they're good. Now we have to move on to the plumbing of everything, and we got to get like our top radiator hose. We don't need to worry about the overflow tank just yet. We will before we fill with antifreeze, but it's not a killing affair at this moment. We'll have to get these tubes cut and welded, and then I have to decide what I'm going to do about this intake over here. I have intake tubes over in the other shop from some other diesels like I had said, and I will bring those over and see what I have that will fit. Once I know how to get from here to there and what I have for tubing and boots, then I can figure out exactly how I'm going to weld up that intake plenum and build it to come over. Once I get that intake plenum welded up and get the intercooler and the radiator tied in, then I know where all of those tubes are going to be, and then we can put the trailer hubs, we can get that mounted up here where it clears the hood and everything, and work on that cantilever system. I was hoping I could get airbags at one of my local parts stores, but I came up empty-handed, so I'm gonna have to order them offline, get them online so that I can do something with them. So let's get everything plumbed up. Once that's done and we get our top radiator mounts in, then we'll move to the inside and start on the dash stuff so that we can see this thing move under its own power by next Saturday. That's my goal. By next Saturday, this thing is going to drive out of the shop. Fingers crossed. I'm going to run over and see what I can come up with for tubes and boots and then we'll be right back. I also am missing this one bolt here. I found it the other day and I didn't bring it over. I know I dropped it when we put the engine in here, and I found it the other day and I set it somewhere and I can't remember where it's at. But I'll go get some more tubing and we'll figure out that intake plenum. That and the lower radiator hose on the passenger side are going to be like the next big thing. This intercooler, I don't know if it needs to sit like right there. I'll probably move it up just a little bit. It clears everything right there. But this intercooler, I'll probably raise it up just a little bit. The upper, okay, I think I found the missing link. This isn't exactly a 90 here, but if we could get it cut down to where it was in that, on that intake plenum, to where it was coming this way, we can cut it off to where it just clears everything. And then this last bend here, cut it off and move it back up. I can't really, okay, so this last bend right here, which is probably about a 45, if we cut this tube off up here and cut this bend out of it, so then we'll put this bend on that tube, which will put us coming across here and then kicking down like that. So we'll be up here like this, and then we just need to somehow get to there. I have this tube that does have a hard 90 in it, and it's got a little offset, and then it looks like it's got another 90 in it. If that goes on there, then we could get the two of them to match. So I think with the two of these tubes, I might have some more over in a Connex container at the house, and I will check on that when I go eat lunch. So I will do that real quick, and then I've got to get this video out to you guys because this is Saturday and I'm supposed to have had a video out this morning. I didn't get there, been busy. With that said, I'm gonna go eat lunch, and then I'll come back, button some of this up, maybe get it cut and spot welded and whatnot, and then go home and get this video out to you guys. All right, back from lunch here. The tubes that I was thinking that I had are the tubes that I already had. Make any sense? So a little update. I've got these cut to where those are gonna hook up nicely. And I didn't have to go with a double offset when it comes out of that one. I just needed a straight chunk. I haven't worked on this hose over here yet. I have this hose marked out as to where it's going to get cut. And this intercooler tube come out of there, goes right up, and it almost goes right to the plenum there, or where the plenum goes. I'm kind of thinking that I just need to cut a mounting flange out of the 1/4-inch plate that matches this square fella, and that will just bolt onto the intake, and then we'll figure out how to go from round to square like that, and we'll just get a pipe coming up and out with it, and we'll kind of run it out at this angle here, and then we'll cut this all off and we'll put another boot up here, tie into that plenum, and we'll have that. And then all I have to do is figure out where I'm going to mount my overflow, because I don't know if it'll fit on the radiator like it used to. Where it's angled like that, it might not be quite right. But on the Ford, it just mounted in here like this. So, I mean, maybe that's how I'll do it. Everything would match up and hook up, and it'd clear the fan, I don't know that it would clear once I get my hydraulic pump on the engine. That hydraulic pump goes on this plate. There'll be a pedestal foot and then the hydraulic pump, and the pump runs off of the belt that runs on this idler right here. That idler, oh, the whole thing's loose. I'll have to get my hydraulics hooked up before I know my coolant can go right there. It can definitely go over here though somewhere. It's not a big deal, we'll figure that one out when we get there. I haven't decided if I'm going to figure out how to use the stock intake. That would kind of be the easiest and cheapest at the moment. I know in Sand Hollow with all the sand and everything, I don't want to run like a K&N right there over top of that tire, because there's 100% guarantee that it will just fill with sand, and we don't want that. So now I have to get these tubes ground down to where I can spot weld those together. I haven't decided if I'm going to TIG weld them or just stitch weld them together with the MIG. Either way is fine. I'll keep plugging away at this though, and we'll figure out exactly where all of the hoses and tubes need to be so that I can build this upper bracket for my radiator. That's kind of boring stuff, so I'll get that cleaned up and spot welded together, get a couple of hoses cut off, and that intake plenum is going to be kind of the thing. This footage needs to go back to the house and get edited pretty soon so that I can get that video out today. So I'm not sure how much farther we're going to make it. Hopefully we make it a bit further. So let me get back to work. I cut out a flange for that intake, and I said that I was going to have to figure out how to go from square to round. I think I figured it out. I just cut one out that's round. Hopefully that fits. And if it does, then I don't have to figure out how to make my pipe. I don't have to beat on it until it's right. And I think that aluminum plenum had short bolts and long bolts. And I'm thinking that the short ones, they just went through the short side of the plenum that was about as thick as the plate that I just cut. So with any luck, I'll be able to just use the 4 shorter bolts from the 2 different engines that we had. With any luck, we can just bolt this right up. Worst case scenario, we just need a little spacer or something on these bolts, but make sure we get all started in here. This one here was giving me a little fit. Go ahead and lightly touch one of these with this impact and see if it bottoms out or if it tightens up. Gonna bottom out, so I'm gonna need a washer. It's not much, but oh yeah, I'm gonna put a washer on there to get that to tighten up, but they're good enough that I'm gonna get by with that as far as doing my mock-up, and then I'll worry about getting a little washer to go on there, kind of a thick spacer washer. And then that 3-inch circle, I've got this intake tube all welded up and it's spot on. As long as the intercooler actually lives there. Go ahead and cut this top radiator over here. I have it marked, but it seems to be moved a little bit. Remember to always keep a clean work area. I'm not going to worry about hooking the other end of that up solid because this radiator, if you remember, the bottoms broke out of it. This has to be unhooked and removed anyway. So let's not get too much of a hurry there. I'm just going to cut about half of that straight part off of this. I'll leave enough that the hose clamp can still seal it up. Nothing like cutting up a brand new radiator hose. And then this has to rotate around, so I'm going to go ahead and cut it too. I don't know, it might need shortened a little bit. But it's easier to cut it off out here than it is when it's down in there. So let's go ahead and slip this on the radiator. I believe this should just fit. Ooh, she's a little tight. I don't know if a little tight is better than a little loose. Sure doesn't make them go together very easy. I might end up wishing I hadn't cut that. My grandpa would sometimes put grease on them, and then a friend of his, they were building motorhomes from scratch, and then they would race them, and his friend built a really hot motorhome, and came out and they drag raced him down the road, and about a week later a couple of his radiator hoses blew off, and then he didn't have a very fast motorhome. It actually burnt to the ground, and they decided that it was because he greased his radiator hoses and got it so hot that she combusted. I need a dead blow hammer to tap on that with. I'm just going to sit this in here and decide what angle this needs to be so I can mark these. Wonder what I did with that hose from the Dodge. I took it off last night. Maybe it's on video what I did with it, because I don't know. You would think it would be right there. Where would I have went with it? Here it is. This seems to have a great big end on it, and it's got a spring in it so it won't collapse. But I really need this tight 90, but I don't think that this smaller end of that will fit over that. I'm going to pull this off to where I can get to everything easier. As big as this is, and as small as this is, I don't know where it loses its size. I need this tight 90, but it's got to be big enough to go over that. I'm going to cut this off. I'm going to regret it. It does me no good the way it is, because it runs right into that intake tube. I guess I could make it go over it, but then it runs out in where the tire's at, into the wheel well. I don't like that. So here goes something, I guess. I know I'm going to regret this. I know it. I can guarantee you that that right there is going to be regretted. Yep, I'm going to regret that one. So with that said, I think that's a good place to end this. I'll work on finding a tight 90 or a solution for that, so that I can get that lower radiator hose on there. And I'll get that plenum, I'll get that figured out and get that all recorded and everything for the next one. But come back for the next one and we'll button this up. We'll get this top brace run over here and get our hubs for our front suspension in. Then we'll move to the inside and we will keep plugging away to where we get this thing to where we can drive it in by next Saturday. That's my goal. You can hold me to it, but I might let you down. Hopefully not. Thanks for watching. Like, share, hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you on Tuesday.